So my name is Daniel Perez. I'm the program administrator here at the Spencer Educational Foundation. And this week's webinar, we're going to talk about workers' compensation. By a show of hands, digital, or you can raise it if you're on your camera. How many are interested in workers' comp or knows that you for sure want to go into workers' comp, or maybe you've never heard about workers' comp and maybe are interested in knowing a little bit more about it? Yeah, we have a couple. Okay, great. Got a couple of thumbs up. Nice, nice, nice. Yeah. So that's the thing, right? A lot of people don't know about workers' comp. So today we have some very, very talented expertise. I'm going to start with introducing Dr. Leslie Cadet. She has her own business. She is the founder of Ascend, who does some great work on, currently workers' comp and making sure that companies are moving forward the right way, doing some consulting there because we have some systems we sometimes need to, you know, nudge along the way. So Dr. Cadet does that. She is an Air Force veteran as well, Harvard graduate, and a frequent conference speaker. So you are in for a treat. And then our next, welcome, Dr. Cadet.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Claire Musselman. And just, she's very strong, as she let us know. From Drake University. She is also a co-host of the podcast Adjusted and co-founded the Transitions uh, that shape workers' compensation industry. So she is also very knowledgeable in workers' comp. I myself don't know much about it, so I'm very excited to learn a little bit more. And our objective for today is, to give you another understanding of a different thing you could do. If you were never heard of workers' comp or actually what they do, or maybe don't even know, the different things you could do in this industry, you're going to learn today. Maybe you'll learn about some of the great things about it, some of the challenges, and hopefully you'll make an informed decision about your careers as you're navigating your university or your career, your early career. So without further ado, Dr. Cadet, Dr. Musselman, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, it's so good to see everybody today. And Dr. Musselman, I think I'd like to start by getting your definition of what is workers' comp and what do the teams look like in the workers' comp space?
Yes. Okay. So I would like to go originally. I didn't know I wanted to go into comp when I was your guys' age either. We joke that we fall into this space. I would not change my experience for the world. And if I could give you guys like one thing to think about, insurance is amazing. Risk management is amazing because with our single decisions that we make on a daily basis, they have a ridiculous ripple effect into what's going to happen for the rest of people's lives. Work comp is one of the just the pinnacles of this because every decision, every phone call, every email that we answer is going to either make or break somebody's life. It's really powerful that you can have that kind of an impact and you can do it for the good, which is where like I'm a big service oriented servant leader type mentality. And I love being able to single-handedly change people's lives for the better. So when I look at workers' compensation, it's technically defined as a an insurance product that is there, state mandated since the early 1900s, that is to help the employer in theory. I like to look at it as a mechanism in which we can restore the livelihood of people and during an unforeseen circumstance that occurs at work. And so when we look at this from more like a bigger picture, there's so much meaning and purpose. And so when we look at who are the teams that are affiliated with this, you've got pretty large teams. For the most part, you've got the injured family as a team for that person. And then you look at the employer, which is a huge avenue. So if you go into risk management, you have abilities to do right by your people. And this is a whole other topic of organizational culture and behavior. But then you also have either the insurance carrier or the TPA or the captive that is going to be adjudicating this claim. And when we think about it, I don't like the term adjuster because you're not adjusting somebody. There's two benefits people qualify for in work comp, lost time benefits and medical treatment. It's very fascinating to me when we go and talk about workers' compensation, especially with employers. We have people that think, oh, people just game the system. It's tons of fraud, blah, blah, blah. There are two benefits mandated by all 50 states, lost time, medical. People can't game a system when there's no laws or regulations around it. Not saying that there's not fraud, but when we start to look at it, work comp is the business of people. It's taking care of people you've already hired to come be a part of your vision, mission, your values of your organization, and taking care of them if they have an unforeseen circumstance that occurs at work. You're
Mhm.
really passionate about this. Is there anything that you would add?
Oh, that was a beautiful definition. I actually am on the medical side of the team. So I'm an occupational and environmental medicine physician. So when an injured worker gets hurt at work, or something that they were doing as a part of their essential job functions causes them to have an injury or an illness, they will be routed to an occupational medicine physician, ideally. There's only 2,000 of us who are board certified in the US. So a lot of times injured workers will go to their family physician or they will go to an urgent care physician who may not have expertise in occupational medicine. So when the injured worker comes to see me, my goal is to help them achieve full health, get completely better so that they can reclaim their life and go back to work. Dr. Musselman mentioned the family as being the team. And so you can imagine if you're the sole breadwinner in your family and all of a sudden you get hurt, now you're not getting your full paycheck because workers' comp pays up to 2/3 of your normal salary. So it's very stressful. Emotions run really high when the injured worker comes in, but I represent how can we get you better faster?
Yes, you are the sole proprietor that helps us get people back to work and back to life. And that's something that a lot of people negate to pay attention to. When someone is injured, a lot of times people focus specifically on the injury. So if there's a gentleman named Joe who works in manufacturing and hurts his shoulder, we treat it like Joe, the shoulder injury, which I believe Dr. Cadet can agree with this. We have to treat the whole person. And so when I say that the family is a team, Joe might be the sole breadwinner. He might have children. He might have a spouse. He might be caring for his parents. He might be caring for other siblings that he has. There might be a lot of ripples that affect this whole recovery process and the stress that comes with that. So the old school way of work comp has always been just treat the injury. We've been trying to look forward with understanding medicine in a holistic, what goes on from a neuroscience approach. How do we address these things? What happens? And a lot of that can also, when we treat things from a medical standpoint, there's also a pretty big behavioral pattern that comes from emotional and mental regulation that can be directly impacted by the employer throughout this process as well.
Absolutely, because if the worker gets hurt and they already feel like the employer doesn't care about them and doesn't have their best interest at heart, it's going to be a lot harder to motivate them to get better faster because they're like, what, what are we rushing to go back to? I work in a cesspool. I am in no hurry to go back to work. And so that can cause a lot of delays with their recovery versus the employer that along the way has been showing they cared about the injured worker. They have light duty programs so that even though you may have broken your ankle, we're not going to sequester you at your house where you're by yourself. You're not having any social interaction with your peers. We actually have a light duty program where you can still come to work because there's something really healthy about waking up in the morning, brushing your teeth, putting your clothes on, getting in your car, driving to your job, seeing your teachers, seeing your classmates, and having that social interaction that's actually very healthy for you. And I think we saw during COVID, when we take that away from people, that's the incorrect answer. We are not built to be in isolation. We are built for community and collaboration. So those employers that have a light duty program, the supervisor is checking in with the injured worker feels like they're respected, that they have decision-making latitude with their job. Those workers typically are very motivated to get back to full duty and recover as soon as possible. Dr. Musselman, so we've talked about the components of the teams that are involved in workers' comp. In your opinion, what are the attributes of a strong team?
I love this. Okay. So communication would be
Yes.
number one for me. And then consistency and then caring. So I'll just stick to three C's. Communication. And this, you guys, this is it's not specific to work comp. Communication is the fundamental, like in any team, in any organization, any relationship you have personally or professionally. How good of a communicator you are is going to make or break your career. I hope you know that right now. If you are not a good communicator, or you've had a friend or a partner or anything tell you you're not, you need to figure it out, because brevity is a strong suit. You've got to be able to understand your audience. Like when we're working with injured human beings, a lot of times we try to give them all of this information up front. But being good at communication means that it's digestible and that it's consumable. So if I call Dr. Cadet knowing that she just got injured, and I say, I'm going to run you through all your benefits, I'm going to tell you everything you qualify for, and she's sitting in an occupational medicine office waiting to be seen, her brain is not going to be apt to take on the information that I want to give her. And this is something that is interesting just in how we digest information and how we continue to study human behavior, with the big drain into neuroscience right now onto why we behave the way we do and what goes on from a brain activity standpoint. When we think about communication, one of the biggest reasons people get attorneys and that this industry is seen as so adversarial is a lack of communication. Whether it be, I don't know if my boss is mad at me, I don't know if I have a job to return to, I don't know where my paycheck's coming from, I don't know where my paycheck is. It's a fear of the unknown because of a lack of communication. And so I go to that one absolutely first. And then it's also maintaining that communication to help alleviate the fear of the unknown, which comes in from the consistency standpoint. And then lastly, you have to care. Like if you don't care, please don't come into this industry. I'll just say it right now. We want to care about bettering people's lives. Want to make sure that we're here to make good things happen for you. I'm not here to make your life worse. There's a lot of TV commercials out there that are on streaming services that say the insurance companies are out to get you. And, you know, we sit around and figure out what's going on, or we're going to send people to the chop shop doctor. I've never, in my 20 years of being in this industry, have I ever wanted to make something bad happen for someone, ever been given direction to do so, or send somebody to a doctor that I wouldn't go see myself. And I've broken 26 bones. So my orthopedic surgeons are real good friends of mine now. So it's fascinating when we think about this is how media has used its influence to kind of give our system the lens that we have for it. And also, I'm here to absolutely give you some fact checked information that that's not the way it really works. But if you can communicate well and you can do it consistently and you genuinely have some authenticity to care, those are what I think those elements of a functional team truly are that make it great. And I would say that's not just in comp, that there's your unsolicited life advice for today. Dr. Cadet, would you add anything to this?
I absolutely agree. And when a patient first comes to see me, the first thing I ask them is, have you heard anything about workers' comp before? What have you heard? And oh, the stories that they sell or they tell. And a lot of it is because of what they've seen on television, as Dr. Musselman said. They've had family members that have gone through the work comp system and had an awful experience. And so my first goal in that first encounter is to get them to relax, right? I'm very big on body language and good bedside manner. So shaking their hand, giving them a warm smile, and saying, okay, this is what you've heard. Let me actually walk you through what the process looks like. And there are some things about workers' comp that we definitely need to work on. And I will say those things to the patient. But I will also say, hey, you're not in this alone. I'm actually your guide. And everything from taking the time to actually examine the patient. If anybody's ever gone to the doctor and they didn't even touch you, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It's like, well, what type of doctor are you? You didn't even examine me. And then explaining, okay, this is your injury. This is how it's going to impact you. This is what we're going to do about it. And then educating them about the other team members that are going to be coming around and reaching out to them to give them information about the claim. I also set expectations with the patients, which is another huge part of communication. Some people think, well, now that I've been hurt on the job, I'm going to get my payday. And I get to say to the patient, actually, there is no payday. You will get your medical needs taken care of. If for some reason at the end of this, you aren't able to return back to full duty, there will be some supplementation of your income, but we want to set the expectation that you're not going to become a millionaire as a result of your claim. So I definitely think clear communication is probably the number one attribute of the team. Dr. Musselman, what about the red flags or the things that say to you, this team is not working effectively on this claim?
So I think the number one thing I look for is fear. So when you were talking about body language, tone, everything that's not said, like not specific words, but literally looking at where do the fears lie within this person? Because fear, if we gonna go down, here we go down the sciencey route. And I'm a big fan of going down that route, even though I am not an MD, I am an ED. When we go down this road, it is really heavily based on when we are stressed out and when we have increase in cortisol levels, our body gets really inflamed and it's really hard to repair tissue when your body's in an inflamed state. So a lot of times people think that work comp is fraud or people are malingering or there's these bad elements that exist within it. When truly, if you want to get down to the root cause, there's been a ball dropped somewhere that causes this to happen. Statistically, hard fraud where people didn't get injured at work and they're faking all of it is 1% to 2%. And I have 8 studies that I will gladly give you because I'm a big data person on this kind of stuff. But where we get this breakdown in communication, I do believe can cause some soft fraud. And it's because there's been a fear of the unknown that hasn't been remedied. And so people feel that they're being taken advantage of as the injured worker. And they want to rectify that, where it's lying about mileage, overfilling prescriptions, not making the effort to return to work or schedule their appointments timely, because who cares? Nobody cares about me. And so this is where we go back and we start to look at what are these red flags? There's been a ball dropped somewhere. And so when I work with employers, I'm very apt about you've got to be consistent in your communication, letting people know that, hey, something, it doesn't feel right, something goes wrong, you can't get a prescription filled, you get a medical bill to your house, there's a plethora of things that can happen. I need you to tell me because what I don't know can and will hurt everybody involved. And a lot of times, the number one person this injured worker needs to hear from is their direct leader. This is their person that has hired them, that's been brought them into their team. And when we think about this cohesive nature, we are not supposed to be in isolation. And after age 25, the people that you spend the most time with are your coworkers. So when we remove somebody from that place, we're not only removing their social network, which whether you want it to be your social network or not, again, this is who you're spending your time with, but we also remove a sense of identity. And I want you guys to think about this for just a second. When you go introduce yourself to someone, like Daniel, I'm going to ask you live here. If I say, hey, Daniel, I'm Claire. It's so nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How do you introduce yourself?
Well, I usually talk about what I do, right? We all talk about what we do for work.
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly what we all do. We're very scripted and we are patterned to do this. It doesn't take much to think, my name is Claire, I'm a professor at Drake, this is what I do. But when we take that big identity piece out of someone and we take them out of work, they're not by their community, they're not by their people, they are losing a sense of themselves that also can cause some psychological issues that go about this. And this is why it's so important that we have that direct leader who reaches out and just says hi, or reaches out after surgery and says, hey, I hope you're doing well. It is little insignificant, what we would consider insignificant moments that absolutely change the trajectory of the course of someone's treatment, because Dr. Cadet can only do what she can do in her office. And it's all of the stuff that goes on outside of that. That might be the most one-on-one time that an injured worker has had to vocalize their story. If the employer is not engaged to learn what happened, what could we have done better? Is there a way to prevent this in the future? Or if the adjuster doesn't understand the entire picture, if the family just needs their person to be better, or if they are somebody who is the provider of their family, they don't want to burden people. This is a big thing. And we see this a lot. And I don't want to go down male versus female, but males who are injured need a little bit more of this care, compassion, concern, hand-holding, because they're bearing the brunt of it all, where women tend to be a little bit better at sharing their story and talking and connecting. And this is where when we start to look at some of the ramifications from a mental health standpoint of these injuries, as well as the treatment plan itself, red flags really stem from who's communicating, who's not. So again, we go back to the same things that make the team great. Was there a ball dropped? Are we missing payments? Missing prescriptions, anything along those lines. Getting a medical bill sent to your house is probably one of the worst ones that we see because it's not an error of anyone. It was probably just a bill coding issue. It is something so, again, insignificant in theory because it's just a coding issue. But when an injured worker gets that bill to their house, they immediately freak out. One, at the price, because I don't know if anyone's been to the doctor lately, but healthcare is kind of expensive these days. And they automatically assume that the employer is not taking care of it, which isn't the truth. Again, we can make assumptions and then we can validate it with data. That's not what's happening. But if the employer doesn't know that the injured worker has gotten a bill, if the insurance company or the TPA doesn't know, nobody can fix it. And a lot of times injured workers get flustered in this process and they just freeze because that's one of our fight, flight, freeze. There's a lot of them these days, but they don't do anything with it, or they don't know who to talk to, or they don't know what to do. And here we go. Here's the fear of the unknown. And then it goes to collections. And I will tell you, as a former adjuster, those people are terrible to deal with at all levels, especially when you're trying to do it on behalf of someone else, where no, we want to pay you. We want to like make sure that you're taken care of. But again, this goes back down to these red flags are things that we should be checking for in a proactive manner that we tend to not. And again, it goes back to care, communication, and consistency. Is there anything that you would add from your experience? Oh, sorry, Danny.
No, sorry. No, I apologize. No, that's a great lesson too, because I just came back from the Insurance Industry Charitable Foundation Symposium in New York, and there was a speaker that had a great speech about, connection and social psychology, but she gave an anecdote of when her upline, when she went on an extended leave for XYZ, and she didn't really connect with her upline. She always thought it was like a boys' club. She had all these issues, but when she was in the hospital in cancer, he really showed up for her. And so that changed her whole perspective and how she thought of him. And when he was doing those things, he would stop by the hospital every single time after work, things like that. She was like, "Why are you doing this? We're not even close." And he'd be like, "Well, my daughter is in the same situation as you, and I would just hate that to happen." So, this is, I think, the lesson to everyone here is that, even if you're not going to go into workers' comp, how many of you guys want to be a leader? Raise your hand. If your like objective is to become a leader or a manager, there you go, right? So at some point, right, someone, maybe your worker gets injured or maybe something happens. So there's lessons here of how to react, right? What if your employee tomorrow gets hurt? You don't know exactly how to handle that or what to say or how to, toe that line or whatever. So that's a great point. Or just to your point or Dr. Cadet's point, if you yourself get injured, how would you like to be treated? And that's very, very important. So thank you for that share. I think that's a lesson there as well.
And I think many patients feel like nobody cares about me. And part of the reason is accessibility. So I can't tell you the number of times I've called somebody on the team to say, hey, what's going on with the order that was placed? Have you approved the order? Have you authorized payment for the order? And you can't get a hold of anyone. So sometimes the injured worker is like, I can't get a hold of my adjuster. I've called the doctor's office 13 times. Nobody ever returns my phone call. So they feel like they're in a silo. So if anything, if you're not already in the habit of professionally returning phone calls within 24 hours, returning emails within 24 hours, if you leave, have the courtesy to put an out of office responder so that people know what's going on with you. That also helps to enhance communication. Okay. And, Dr. Musselman, maybe we can transition into a few case examples. I know for myself, I once cared for a plumber who was lifting a toilet and he got an inguinal hernia. Now, an inguinal hernia is where a portion of your intestine, gentlemen, goes down into your scrotum where it shouldn't be. And it's very painful, and you would obviously freak out. So, in my economy, when I was in the Air Force, if someone had an injury, I could get them in to see imaging and the specialist within 1 to 2 days. Unfortunately, that's not really how it works in workers' comp. If you come in with an inguinal hernia, it's probably going to take me 5 days to get the imaging I need, and then another 2 to 4 weeks before I can get you in to see the specialist, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so, in this particular case, the adjuster that was on my team was amazing. He was making sure he had the request for authorization. That might be a term that you all are familiar with, but basically when I write the order saying the patient needs a CT scan, There's another piece of paper called an RFA that has to go to the adjuster, and the adjuster says, yes, we, the insurance company, authorize payment for the CT, and then the patient can go get their imaging. So he was on top of making sure the forms were received in a timely manner, that the CT was scheduled in a timely manner. And then the patient eventually got surgery, but they had complications after the surgery where they couldn't feel their private parts. So again, you're already hurt and you can't pull in the money that you used to pull in. You've had surgery and now you can't feel your private. You can only imagine how emotionally distraught you would be if that happened to you. And you're like, well, my doctor says I need to now see a urologist. But urology is backfilled and it's going to take 6 weeks before you can get your appointment, right? So all of that is adding to your anxiety and your stress level. The adjuster, again, was amazing about calling throughout multiple communities to see is there any urologist anywhere who will see a workers' comp patient, because not all doctors want to fool with workers' compensation. And this goes back to the reputation. It goes back to the way the system is set up and reimbursements. But this adjuster went above and beyond to try to help the worker. And that's really the type of professional you want to be, where you go above and beyond because that's what you would want somebody to do for you. Dr. Musselman, what about you? Have you had any success
Yeah.
stories in work comp?
Yeah. So I'll give you guys one when I was a chief risk officer, and I'll give you one when I was an injured worker, because I've been an injured worker 3 times total. 2 times have been phenomenal, and 1 time was terrible, but that's okay. You know, we're still 2 to 1. So when I was a chief risk officer, we had a gentleman that broke his leg in 8 spots. We worked in the oil and gas industry. And so a lot of times when you're going out to an oil rig, you're hours away from medical treatment. And so the gentleman just fell, like just literally started to twist his ankle and fell. And it just, you accept your employees as they are. So that's something else to always keep in the back of your mind as a leader. If you ever deal with workers' compensation, we're taking people as they are. So nobody's going to be perfect. Sorry. I mean, we all are imperfectly perfect, and we should start with that. But so his recovery journey was going to be very complicated and pretty gnarly to try and make sure that the bone fusion was going to happen and that things were going to go well. But our safety director went and took him dinner a couple of times in the hospital and brought dinner not only for the injured worker and himself, but also for their wives, so that the wives could connect. And they didn't have to do that. This is literally where we go to when we think outside the box in workers' compensation. It's people being people. Like, hospital food's awful. I mean, as much as we try to we can try and make it better. It's, there's just, there's room for improvement. But with that, it's just people being people and thinking if I was in that position, I would want to feel secured. I would want to feel like somebody cared. But I thought the best part of this is when you can empower your people and empower your team. So if you end up going into risk management and you're over safety, you're over fleet, and you've got these other people that are also part of your team, making sure that they feel empowered to be able to make decisions like that. Like going and buying someone dinner after, like the night of their injury, sending pizza home to their house so they don't have to worry about how to feed their children or their family because they're already dealing with the injury stuff. They might still be at the doctor's office. They might be trying to go fill their script, you name it. This is like $30 for a return on investment. That's countless. And I don't know how many times I have to talk to people and talk to employers and insurance companies where this will pay dividends, but it pays dividends in like soft funds versus being like, oh, well, we got them back to work 7 days sooner because we did it this way. You can't prove this in that context, but it makes a huge difference. For that gentleman, we ended up like his reserves. So when we set reserves for how much something's going to cost, we did not expect him to go back to work right away because eight leg fracture, like it's a big deal. We had him back to work like in 6 weeks. We started bringing him back to the office. And now, I know this is being recorded, but nonetheless, he would come in and flirt with our office staff. And they'd try and give him some jobs to do. But, it just got him out of his house. It got him around community. He could see his guys that he usually went on the oil rigs with. He could do his thing. and he just had fun during his recovery journey. And we made it so that it was joyful and playful because we knew the power of bringing him back into the workplace. So his reserve, I think, was set at like $180,000 is what we expected to pay for all the surgeries, you name it, all the stuff. Very fun. And I think we closed him out for 28,000 because we were proactive. We got him back to work. We found ways that we could get him back into the oil rig using some technology stuff because we couldn't get him to normal physical therapy. So we had to think outside the box a lot. But it genuinely was like, what do you need? What do you need from us to be successful? And our CEO at the time would call. He called him and said, you know what, I just want to thank you for being our employee. I'm really sorry that you got injured, but we are here to take care of you. And this is a fallacy that kind of exists in the employment side. When you take on an employee, you are now taking on their care and wellness because you're going to pay things under personal health or it's going to come under workers' compensation. You get a lot more control under work comp. We don't get to choose anything under personal health, but it's going to be a bucket that you are footing the cost for. So I like to encourage employers to really be actively involved, especially on the comp side, because you're going to pay for it anyway. And it's just, are you paying for it in insurance premiums? Are you paying for it like dollar for dollar on comp, depending on what kind of your program you have? So that's one way. And I think that was really powerful. And we would send cards too, like just a quick get well card, get the team to sign it. That's just like, hey, we're thinking of you. So again, constant communication from our company that showed that we cared in a different platform. So we have the safety director, we have my risk team, we have the CEO, we have the direct leader, we have different people, the office staff. We've got everybody showing this gentleman that we care. And it absolutely showed financially in comparison to other demographics when we would cost compare that claim. Now, on my side, I injured my hip and had a gnarly 5 surgery hip. I did not have a hip replacement. I used my own body parts. Super great. But our CEO called me the day after just to make sure everything was okay. And that makes such a big difference. Like it was a text. I got a text and then he called to follow up. And was like, I just want to make sure that everything went well. And if it didn't, tell us. Like those little moments, like I'm telling you guys, like we text all the time. It takes 10 seconds, but it makes such a big difference. And then my team came and saw me a couple days later and it was really wonderful. So there's different situations. Now I have one not so great situation where I could not get someone to call me back. And at this point, I'm a VP of workers' compensation at a TPA. And it says so in my signature. So I'm sure when this person gets the claim, they're like, great. Or they're like fraud because she's in work comp. So, but it was totally random injury where we were traveling and it's fun, but I injured my knee and I could not get my adjuster to call me back for weeks upon weeks upon weeks upon weeks. So by the time I even was seen, because I was traveling when I got injured, it was 2 months after my date of injury, 2 months to get me even in to go see. And I, like being in the space, like we know people, we know doctors, we know how to do this, but I couldn't use any of my resources because this is now out of my hands. And so to Dr. Cadet's point, especially when working in the Air Force, you've got, sorry, you said Air Force, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. I don't want to get that wrong. But you've got pull in certain areas. And then when you come into workers' compensation, there is none of that. Like you don't get that because of state guidelines, statutes, regulations, so much compliance that we kind of beat that compliance into people and we take away that human approach. And that human approach is what makes all the difference when we start to look at what's happening. So simple things, return a phone call. Like I go back to everything that we talk about in workers' compensation that can pay financial dividends or can truly enhance people's lives. You learned this in kindergarten. I'm not teaching you anything else that you don't know. It is literally everything I learned in kindergarten. You know, build camaraderie. Hey, I'm playing in the sandbox. Do you want to come play with me? Oh, here, I have an extra half of a sandwich. You don't have it here. It is like literally every day is the opportunity to be a better version of yourself. And then you get to help people in the process. And it is these little moments that make things so powerful and so great. I would encourage you guys to connect with Dr. Cadet and I on LinkedIn and whatnot if you guys are ever curious about this industry. But my very first like LinkedIn recommendation is from an injured worker from back when I was an adjuster, because that was such a big difference. And I ended up creating a group called the Workers Recovery Unit that's at Continental Western, which is one of the WR Berkeley companies. And I ran every idea I had to focus on psychosocial issues, emotional intelligence, and positive psychology by this injured worker back in like 2012, 2013, 2014. And we went live with this group like 2017, is right? And she helped me like, yes, this would work well. No, this wouldn't work well. Hey, this was what I missed or I needed or whatnot, because I had gone through the injured worker process at that point. But almost everything is like humanistic, like how to talk to somebody, what tone you're going to use, how much information you're going to throw at them, and then what way, auditory, visually, paper, like actual tactful or, you know, stuff that you can actually hold. And we start to look at how this is fundamentally everything we learned in kindergarten. So mean, I laugh, but it's so true. So again, be a human and be kind. And that those are the stories that end up mattering. There are tons of bad stories out there, and I don't feel like we need to put any more out into the industry because there's billions of them. But I love that Dr. Cadet came with a positive one. I'm sure two great ones to do too.
And Dr. Musselman, the fact that your adjuster didn't call you for 2 months, depending on the type of injury, that action will drive the claim costs up because now you're delaying the length of time it takes for the worker to get the care that they need. I would venture to say that was thousands of dollars. Her non-responsiveness cost the employer.
I'll tell you, the non-responsiveness ended up in a lawsuit because that's what happens. I need somebody to talk to me, and in this system. So truly, at this point, I wanted to just put it under my personal health insurance because I didn't care. Like I don't care. I don't care. I just need the medical treatment.
Right.
And my employer was so great though. They're like, no, we need to take care of this. I'm like, no, it's fine. I will get more money on short-term disability. I don't want it under work comp. So that's the other thing. People think, oh, I'm going to put it under work comp so I can make all this money. This is where I have to educate employers. Have an awesome short-term disability system.
Yeah.
You won't need the comp stuff.
Yeah.
But this is, again, how are you going to take care of people? You are now my employee. Work comp is not a remedy for poor hiring decisions. So make sure you're hiring appropriately for your teams. But then I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to either take care of you under personal health or we're going to take care of you under comp. Medical, medical. Wages, wages. So this is where you look at what's your short-term disability plan, what's your PTO policy, and then what does it look like on the comp side too? And how do you educate people so that it is plain language and everybody knows what you qualify for? So even if you guys don't go or if you don't go into the workers' compensation space, knowing this in case you guys get injured is really important, whether it be personal or work comp, or if you have some type of your own leave of any kind, knowing what benefits you qualify for and what are the parameters around those. We all get benefits. We all have to do our open enrollment. And it is fascinating to me how many people don't understand it, including the HR professionals administering the programs. So be educated on what you guys need to make sure that you are doing the best for you, because you can't help anyone if you're not taking care of yourself first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Daniel, I think you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate just for the audience, so far what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is connect, right? We all want to connect to people, and that goes across the board. So, our title today is serving the injured worker as a team. So how do you serve? By connecting with your team, right? Connecting with your upline, downline, whatever that is, you have to connect with your team. You have to connect. And then that in turn kind of translates, like we talked about, dollars and cents, but more importantly, the people aspect of it, which I would say is probably more important than ever, because with AI and everything changing, making things faster, and we're gonna get to the tech piece. And I know, Dr. Cadet, you're passionate about that, about all the flow of not, happening on time or timely manners or whatever. But, I do think all that tech will be addressed at some point, some company, which we'll talk about here as well, because you being a founder, you being a COO, we talk a little bit about different avenues we can take within workers' comp. But essentially all that is connect, talk to a person like a person, which we all want to do. When you get home, even your dog wants to do that. When you get home from work, your dog is like, do you see me? Am I here? Can you acknowledge me? Right. And so if you just go about life in general, even in your internship as a leader, those are all leadership skills. And I think those people skills are going to become more and more important the more tech we get.
Daniel, you bring up a really good point with that. So when we talk about, I love the dog analogy. I'm going to steal this from you because that was wonderful. Our biological wiring is very tribal mentality. We need to connect. We want that. We also want to be seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued for what we do. If you can go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you try and work your way up the pyramid to self-actualization, we want to feel valued, but we need to be seen, heard, and acknowledged throughout that process to get there. And so when we start looking at it like that, it makes me think, and I think this is a Harvard study, so but I cannot, it's either Harvard or Stanford, but I'm 90% sure it's Harvard, where they did a study of babies and their mother, and the mom not making any facial reaction when the baby would coo, cry, do anything. And it made me think of that with our dogs and wanting that validation immediately. But this study, it's like, oh gosh, I can't imagine the people that had to be in it, because to keep a straight face when like your child needs something, oh my gosh. But it was showing the power that acknowledgement piece has. That doesn't go away when you get older. It is still there. You want to be heard. I want to tell my story. Like, I want to make sure that this doesn't happen for somebody else, or I just want to feel validated in my experience. I'm currently halfway through writing a book on the emotions and injured worker experiences, so that employers have an idea of what to do with it, injured workers feel validated, and adjusters can know how to navigate the system. And with like, how do you do this with a human? Because sometimes it's hard when you're like, oh, this person's really angry. Okay, there's something else under that anger. We got to dig into that. And we start to look at that. But I love the dog, because you're right. They just want to be acknowledged. Well, we all do. And especially when you're injured, because you're in a super vulnerable place where not only has your body not shown up for you, you still have all the requirements of your day-to-day life. So on average, we're handling like 7 other things. Like you guys here right now, guarantee you everybody's doing something else in some capacity, thinking of what am I going to have for lunch? How much longer is this webinar? These 2 women are amazing, whatever you guys are thinking. But then when we've got, okay, we have schedules, we have kids to pick up, we've got all this other stuff that goes on in our life. Then when you get injured, we're going to tie your arm around your back, and we're going to make it really complicated. You're going to have a really hard time trying to heal yourself, and you still have to do all those other things that you were already thinking about before. And so when we start to think about it in that capacity, sometimes people just want to be validated that this experience is tough. And I know Dr. Cadet probably has to do a lot of that in her office. She's like, you are not wrong. And also, we're still trying to get you on this road to recovery. And so trying to give people that validation, like, hey, I'm here, please acknowledge me, goes right back to what you just said about the dog. I mean, totally taking that some things.
No, that point is so well taken, because those cases that I've seen where the worker wanted to sue and they also wanted to transfer providers, and now I'm getting them as the second leg of the race. The first 30 minutes of the encounter is just listening without doing all the talking. Just let them get everything off of their chest. And then, as Dr. Musselman said, you want to validate what they just told you. They just want to feel heard. 9 times out of 10, I can walk the patient off the ledge and keep them from seeking legal counsel, because it's almost like, oh, there's somebody listening to me. And they all start crying. And then they all apologize for crying. And I'm like, don't apologize. That's why we're here. And I'm handing them tissues. And I'm like, it's a safe space. It's okay. I understand. And so being able to give that to patients, I think, is invaluable. And the professionals who have those soft skills, they soar to the top. The professionals that don't have it fall to the bottom. And you, even as students right now, you are developing your brand and your reputation, and the way that you're interacting with your peers and your faculty, that all carries forward into the future. So there will be people who won't want to work with you in the future because they saw how you were as a student. There are physicians I trained with that I would never send a patient to, because I know how they are in the background, right? Because anybody can show up and put a certain mask on. But when people have been around you for a protracted period, a prolonged period of time, and they know what your true character is, that's going to follow you. So I have just enjoyed this conversation so much. Daniel, I wonder if we can ask the students if they have any specific questions
Yes.
they'd like to ask Dr. Musselman and myself.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, I think we're about at that time. So that's a great time to start asking. If you all have any questions, you can either unmute yourselves or put it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Um, we have some great knowledge here, so take advantage of that. Go ahead, Nick.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. I'm fortunate enough to intern at a hospital here in Oregon on the risk management team. And I I guess I just have a comment, not more of a question, but the insurance team and the risk management team is a very big team at this hospital, and I've noticed that there's maybe a couple individuals that I work with. Everybody's great. There's just a couple that I noticed that view almost every claim as a frivolous claim, and like I don't know how to describe it well, but I think it's just you guys have such a refreshing take on trying to help the injured worker. So really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for that, Nick. And I know why they behave that way. Workers' comp can be very tough emotionally. Um, I'm trying to help the worker and they're mad at me and then they want to fire me. Or you do see people who come in and they hate their job and they're looking for a way out. And so they use the medical system and you can become very calloused.
Right.
But again, your inner character and your desire to help people should be enough to overcome any callousness that comes as a result of what we do.
The other piece of that is we all bring bias. So, you know, if you're human, you're biased. It's how we stay fundamental. It's how we are, we exist and we stay alive. Workers' comp has its own plethora of biases that people bring in. Like when I go in and I start talking to employers, I'm like, all right, so when I say workers' compensation, who gets excited or has had a positive experience? And out of like 1,200 people last week, I had two hands up in the air. And I'm like, I don't know
Hmm.
what I'm going to do if everyone says yes, because I don't have to change my presentation. But we start walking through bias and why we feel that we bring a bias into this industry. And we start looking at all the influence that's gone on around. And then I like hearing stories like Dr. Cadet and I've shared today where no, there's tons of good stories. We just, those aren't girthy. They don't sell. They don't bring a lot of depth and they don't make other people money, because that's one of the fun things that I also like to pay attention to is the money trail in comp. Because I can promise you, Dr. Cadet's not making rolling in the cash with her work comp people. It is other strategic partners is what I would say. And a lot of the jadedness comes from faultiness within those systems as well. But this is where, you know, you want to be the change. This is where she and I are here starting this conversation to get you guys excited, because you guys are our future. And I get so excited working with students because you guys all have such great perspectives. And a lot of the things that have been tolerated in the past, you guys are not tolerating, and I am here for it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
I
and
was this
go
I was
ahead, go
going to
ahead.
say thank you. This is Kim, and I work in the industry. I'm an account manager for the adjusters and nurse case managers, and I too see so much of just negativity before they even start the claim. They'll be like, "Oh my God, I know this guy," and you know the stories. But while listening to this, I was thinking that some sort of a CEU or something for adjusters and nurses to talk about the importance of injured workers, not saying that they're not doing it, but just so they know the just to kind of reiterate it to them, because a lot of adjusters I've worked with are long time adjusters. They have so many cases, but it would make the difference in the world of workers' comp if they could be kind of retrained or reminded.
That's such a good point,
Yeah,
Kim. I know Work Comp College, they offer a lot of training for adjusters. Dr. Musselman, do you have other resources for adjusters and trainings?
yeah, their Claims and Litigation Management Alliance has some, as well as RIMS. I know SHRM does not, but hopefully there will be other avenues that come out soon. But yeah, Work Comp College has some good ones. Otherwise, we don't that, and I can just make a CEU for everybody. It'll be great. I do want to, like Kim, to your points, thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your perspective. One of the things that I tend to do whenever I get a little jaded in this system, because I have, like, our neighbor had a back injury and I was like, is it real? I hate that because I've been in the industry. Like, I talk about this, I teach emotional intelligence. Like, this is stuff that I should not think. And then I have to check myself. And I remember my very first work comp patient, or my very first work comp injured worker. And his name was Ralph. He was 51 years old. He had a carpal tunnel claim. His wife died the year before of cancer. And I remember Ralph because I was like, nobody is at home with Ralph now. So I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be that person that shows up. And one of the videos that I love, if you guys are Dwayne Wade fans, I'm a huge, big Dwayne Wade fan. He has like the last 5 jerseys that he's given before he ends his NBA career. And it's 5 people he didn't realize how much of an impact he'd made on his life, not because he was a basketball player, but because of the person he is. And one of them is his mom, which is phenomenal. If you guys haven't seen this, it's a fantastic advertisement. But it is really powerful on showing like it is just showing up and checking in on people. You would, like Dwayne Wade's mom says, you would come and see about me. You would literally just care because you took the time to care. And I like to go back to remembering those first conversations that I ever had with Ralph, where he was like, yeah, you know, I was putting off the surgery. I needed it. My wife was dying. It's been about a year. So now like, I need to try and fix myself so I can keep on keeping on. And I was like, I'm going to check in with you weekly if that's okay. And if you want me to call more, I'll call more. And if you don't, if that's too much, you just let me know. And I sent him a card. And that has been my thing since day one. As me as an adjuster, I always send cards. Today, I still send snail mail, which stamps are like 68 cents now. Just fascinating and wow. But it's little moments like that, that somebody just gave a shit about you. Like it's so insignificant, but it's so powerful. So I get really passionate about thinking about that. But I always go back to, I remember Ralph. And I go back to like, we all have that one that's like true goodness. Or I've had an adjuster when our teams, I got sent a Christmas card of him with his granddaughter. And he was like standing up, embracing her. And he's like, wouldn't have been able to stand had you not like walked me through this process. And so when you start to pay attention, it's those stories. And then, okay, so from a behavioral strategy here, having a cue that on your bad days, you remember the why. And you remember the meaning and you remember the purpose and you remember the lives you change. And so for me, it's going and queuing up Ralph. I remember for my adjuster, it was, she had the picture of her injured worker and his granddaughter. There's these cues that you can do that help get you out of that negativity zone, that remember your why. Because if we've got meaning and purpose, you can achieve anything and everything is figure outable.
That's so good.
That's great. It's in the words of Maya Angelou, right? People will forget what you did, what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel, right? And so if we go about life that way through workers' comp as leaders, as team workers, you know, I think that gets you very far, talking about connections, and that'll also open your career up just and like you mentioned, will also make dollars and cents better. And at the end of the day, it's good business, right? Because every business is a relationship business. So great. I think we have 5 minutes. So if there's a quick question, then we'll
Daniel, I
take it.
see one here from Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson.
Great.
How large of a role do you think the psychological aspect of people is? Also, I like the description of the humanistic approach, but how can the next generation implement it within the foundations of the industry? Oh, that's so good. The psychological aspect is huge because that shapes your frame for what happened to you and how you're going to get through it. So if psychologically you have more of a victim mindset, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get through your claim than if you have an owner mindset, right? As opposed to, why did this happen to me? It's framing it as, what is this going to do for me? And the humanistic part is just you showing up in the industry as you
Yeah.
are.
The
Yeah.
awareness, it is like how you show up. So we talk about every business is a relationship business. It is. Every interaction you have is your personal brand. I teach personal branding at Drake, and this is huge. How you show up every single day, your consistency through your communication. And if you care, here we go, right back to the beginning. This is how, when you start to think about that humanistic approach, like nobody told me, like, this is what I should be doing for Ralph. This is what you're supposed to do, is like send a card. Like, if you guys are interviewing and you aren't sending handwritten notes, I know emails are great. Shoot a card, a handwritten note. It makes such a big difference. These are like dying skill sets that make people feel validated. And time is truly your only currency. So when you take time to do something that's out of the ordinary, it sets you apart. It helps establish a better connection. And again, it sets you apart from your own personal brand. And that humanistic approach is all about how you show up, the words you choose to use. We did not use the word claimant once during this presentation, because that is not how Dr. Cadet and I treat injured human beings. They tend to be referred to as that in our system. I like to call people by their name. It's kind of interesting, like, because we're human. So I don't reference people by claim numbers. I never have. I like to call people by their name. And when people would come present cases to us for money or strategic plans or whatnot, I would ask, okay, so what do you know about this person? What do you know about their family? What's going on in their life? Like, tell me something about them. Do they have any pets? Do they have grandchildren? What are their hobbies? Because if you can't get to that connection piece with someone, you're not doing your job effectively. And that is in leadership as a whole. We spend so much time talking about work, but what about the people? The people are what drive those connections. The people are what drive the relationships. And it's not people's job to remember you. It is your obligation and responsibility to make sure that they can't forget you. And I'm telling you, when you get to work with injured workers every day, I don't want them to forget me because of the good stuff that I made happen for their life, not because I was the person that didn't pay them for 6 weeks and made them freak out that they weren't going to be able to pay their mortgage. I want them to be like, oh, she moved my MRI up 2 weeks so I could get seen sooner. This is fantastic. So again, go back to like the Maya Angelou quote that Daniel shared. How do you want to leave people feeling? What imprint do you want to leave on their life?
And to piggyback off of Kim's point, there's so many in the industry that already have that negative connotation. So you be the professional that's not like that. While everyone's in the office gossiping about the patient and how annoying they are that they called 300 times, you be the one that doesn't do that, right? And you're just setting yourself apart. Because if it was your mom, you wouldn't want everybody in the office talking about her because she's just super stressed out and she can't get anybody to respond to her. You would want somebody to go the extra mile and call her and move her appointments up and check on her and send her. So just be that person.
I love that. I absolutely, if you hear, I would say that in life, like if people aren't contributing in a conducive manner, shut it down. Do you guys want to know how to be that change? I absolutely have no problem shutting people down, especially when they're bad mouthing people. You guys, we've got so much time in this world and you have so much energy to spend it during that time. Make it worthwhile, make it productive, make it impactful, because that negativity will always be there. And you guys are better than that. And you're going to set it up for what's yet to come.
For sure.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Culture permeates and you are the culture, right? Thank you both so much, Dr. Cadet, Dr. Musselman, for all your knowledge shared today. It's been great. Thank you to all the people that came and joined us. We will be posting this online as well. I know some of you are asking for it, so we're excited. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Remember, next week is 4th of July. There is no session, so please take a breather to be with your family, connect with someone that day. And then we'll be back Thursday, July 11th. Okay, so y'all have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you. Great class.
Thank you all.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.